He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. You know, President Trump gave a speech yesterday on trade that I could not agree with more strongly. That is, I could not disagree with more strongly. I just am saying this protectionism stuff and tariff stuff is deadly. And yet the budget he proposed today was absolutely outstanding, except in a couple of respects, where they want to revive the Export-Import Bank, which is ridiculous. But overall, outstanding. Now, I don't know how we get a hold of this $20 trillion fiscal operating debt and over $200 trillion unfunded liabilities if we don't start realistically cutting spending. Yes, we want economic growth. That's why you support slashing taxes, slashing regulations, slashing Obamacare. That's why you support entrepreneurship through trade and commerce and so forth and so on. But the problem we have today, ladies and gentlemen, is this endless spending. We are on this treadmill. And any time a president tries to actually do something about it, which is rare in and of itself, we're told about how many people will go hungry, how many seniors will be thrown off this, how many this will be that. And this is the rhetorical and political problem. When you have to look down the road, when you look down the road at the horrendous consequences of this kind of profligate, unconscionable, immoral spending, what it's going to do to children and grandchildren and future generations. To many people, that's an abstract argument because they prefer to listen to politicians who say you can have it both. That you can have it both. You can have all you want, redistribution of wealth, and the future generations will be unaffected. It's just not true. It's simply not true. So I want to get into this today. Also, the media are breathlessly reporting that now the Senate Intelligence Committee chairman and ranking member have put out a statement saying, no, Obama didn't order wiretaps on Trump. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we already knew this. And I'm not going to let the media off so easily. We're not going to let the media off so easily. This was never about Trump's tweet. Never. I know they want it to be about his tweet, but it's not about his tweet. It's about investigative, criminal, and intelligence activities, how information was gathered on and whether Trump and his people, his enterprises, banks, whatever it was, based on leaks into the media, and what steps were taken by the administration, the Obama administration, prior to Donald Trump being inaugurated. We already know some of them, and we're not going to let go. We're not going to let go. The only reason this investigation is taking place now by both of these committees is because of you and me. The only reason. We have a right to know if police state tactics were used. All the reporting up to a few weeks ago suggested they were. Then they reversed course. Oh, there's nothing here. Move along, move along. No, we're not moving along. We're not moving along at all. I, for one, would like to know on what basis some of these investigations were triggered. Based on what? I would like to know what the White House staff knew that they were spreading around before they left office. What intelligence information? I would like to know what happened with the FISA court in June and later in October. I would like to know what their application said, if anything. What the warrant said in October, if anything. And the fact that these chairmen have come out and said what we already knew is of zero consequence. None. So we are not going to let up on the media, and we're not going to let up on this issue. Because it's one of two things, essentially, that happened. Number one, there was never any collusion, as they say, and yet these various departments and agencies, either directly or through the back door, conducted investigations anyway. And number two, information was shared with the White House. It clearly was, according to the New York Times. Well, what was shared with the White House, and on whose say-so? So we're not going to let up on this. Don't let them fool you. We don't live in their reality. We live in the real reality, okay? Don't let them fool you. They're not going to fool us. So they can, we found out finally, once and for all. They said, okay, great. We already knew that. I never even said that on my Thursday radio show, period. And I watched some of the president's interview with Fox, with Tucker Carlson. And he said, look, I looked at that New York Times piece on January 20th. I watched the Bret Baier show. I think he's talking about when Speaker Ryan was on there. And I drew my conclusions that way. And, the word wiretap had quotes around it. Wiretap means more than physically tapping wires. I knew exactly what he meant, and so did all of you. But here we play this game. But we're not going to play the game. We're not going to play the game. This is a hiccup. Now we want to know more. Now let's talk briefly, if we can, about this budget. I know it's boring, but it shouldn't be boring. The proposal is a significant increase in defense spending, a significant increase in spending on the Department of Homeland Security, significant increase in spending on the Veterans Administration and so forth. In other words, things the government is supposed to do. National security, domestic security, our veterans, and so forth. Significant cuts at the EPA. Do you know about half of the EPA's budget is grant giving? Did you know that? You may get this idea that they sit there and you got all these environmental experts sitting there and they've got labs and they're checking the air. That's not how this works. They give billions of dollars to nonprofit organizations, most of them left-wing, billions of dollars to universities and colleges to advance their agendas. These universities and colleges and these left-wing groups, they have to make application, and of course they give it mostly to people who share their left-wing agenda. So half, maybe more than half, of the EPA's budget is redistributing monies to their favored third parties. That's pretty damn outrageous. But let's discuss this briefly. Let's discuss briefly what's going on in this country in terms of spending, okay? I've mentioned this before, but let's underscore it today, because what you're not hearing in any of the discussion about the Trump proposed budget is the debt. No charts on the debt are being presented. In February of 2015, Boston University professor of economics, Dr. Lawrence Kotlikoff, testified before the Senate Budget Committee about what he called America's fiscal insolvency and its generational consequences. He flatly stated, quote, "Our country is broke. It's not broke in 75 years or 50 years or 25 years or 10 years. It's broke today. Indeed, it may well be in worse shape than any developed country, including Greece." This is his testimony. He condemned Congress for cooking the books. He said Congress's economically arbitrary decisions as to what to put on and what to keep off the books have not been innocent. Successive Congresses, whether dominated by Republicans or Democrats, have spent the post-war accumulating massive net fiscal obligations, virtually all of which have been kept off the books. So Kotlikoff explained that the real debt picture is far worse than the federal government admits. Now remember, this is 2 years ago. He said the U.S. fiscal gap currently stands at $210 trillion. The size of the U.S. fiscal gap, $210 trillion, is massive, he said. It's 16 times larger than the official U.S. debt, which indicates precisely how useless official debt is for understanding our nation's true fiscal position. This is his testimony. He said in 2013, the fiscal gap stood at $205 trillion. In 2014, it was $210 trillion. Hence, the country's true 2014 deficit. The increase in its fiscal gap was $5 trillion, not $483 billion increase in official debt reported by the CBO. So if in 2017, ladies and gentlemen, our fiscal debt, unfunded liabilities was $220 trillion, growing at $5 to $7 trillion a year. It's now $220 trillion. Now, Professor Kotlikoff concluded, what should be obvious to all. He testified U.S. post-war generational policy is accurately characterized as take as you go. Over the decades, Republican and Democratic Congresses and administrations have taken ever larger amounts of resources from young workers and transferred them to older retirees. The resources taken from the young and given to the old were called, in the main, taxes. Taxes. The young were effectively told, don't worry, we're calling these resources taxes, but when you're old, you'll receive massive transfer payments that more than make up for what you're paying now. Thus, there is a colossal transfer of wealth, not yet created, by younger people and future generations to our generation, ladies and gentlemen, which will doom America's children and grandchildren if left unabated. This is from Plunder and Deceit. Moreover, the nation's increased debt burden will wreak havoc on the economy in very specific ways. Higher interest rates, slower economic growth, weaker job markets, higher taxes, higher inflation rates. The CBO notes that the enormous amount of government securities required to finance debt crowd out investments by individuals and businesses in the private marketplace, including in manufacturing, research, infrastructure, small and large business opportunities. And it goes on. And it goes on. This is the context in which this debate on the federal budget and federal spending should be held, and it is never the context in which it is. Never. The media don't care. The Praetorian Guard media. That's all they're about, advancing the left's agenda. And so they will give you the stories of the people who will suffer, and the people who will this, and the people who will that, as we spend ourselves in a massive bankruptcy and oblivion. Or as this professor says, we already have. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Nancy Pelosi is very concerned about the proposed budget. Listen very carefully. Cut 10, go.
More than $9 billion cut from education. Now, remember this. Nothing brings more money to the Treasury than investment in education. So when the Republicans say we need to reduce the deficit and so therefore we must cut education, that is a stupid economy because it would, again, nothing brings more money to the Treasury to reduce the deficit than the education of the American people, and recognizing that our mission is about the future. It's about the future, and that future demands that we invest in education and health, the health and well-being of the American people and our families for our children, our children, our children. So I wish you a happy St. Patrick's Day. Perhaps as we have St. Patrick's Day lunch, we can have a moment of what? A moment of comedy, of goodwill in honor of St. Patrick. And hopefully that will carry us through But this budget is really a slap in the face of the future.
You got that? For Nancy Pelosi, every day is St. Patrick's Day, wouldn't you say, Mr. Producer? I'm starting to think so. Rambling idiocy of the Democrat leader in the House of Representatives. Children, children, children. Unless, of course, they're in the womb. Then abortion, abortion, abortion. But, ladies and gentlemen, is it not time that the Republicans defend young people and future generations by explaining that it's Nancy Pelosi and her ilk that are destroying the future with these massive borrowing and spending agendas? Why is it that they don't go on offense? Why is it that they can't? Cut 11, go.
This is a budget of the deconstruction of the federal government. They are deconstructionists. They have said that. I mean, they make no bones about that. They have, if one thing, listen to what they say. There is clarity. They want to deconstruct. In this case, you see what they're doing in terms of infrastructure.
Go ahead.
In the case of Speaker Ryan, he has in his budget over and over again.
You know, Mr. Producer, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but let's find our mumblers, please, because I feel like our mumblers are more coherent than Nancy Pelosi, certainly when it comes to this. Do you have our collection of mumblers, yes or no?
Kan ikke erfaringen i det Ghost Track?
They have an idea.
It costs they just gave them
the withdraw, bringing U.S. home troops from home,
And the
you need somebody.
Wait, so what? Finally, what?
Budget.
But resist, we must, and we will much. About that, be committed.
I'm a warrior.
That it was.
I mean, they said that.
Look,
Was it him?
Why? I didn't.
I wasn't really going to swing into this, but I'm going to. What is the job of a radio host? What is the job of a radio host? Well, there is no job description for a radio host. Pretty much, at least for the company I work with, you're free to be what and who you are. That's not true with all radio companies, by the way. One in particular that shall go nameless, at least for now, where they browbeat their hosts to take a particular position. But I can tell you, where I work, I never talked to the CEO of Cumulus, never in my life. She's never heard the sound of my voice other than on the radio, I suppose, and I've never heard the sound of her voice. Same with the CEO of Westwood One, which is a wholly owned subsidiary. Same with her. I don't even know what their political views are. I just know they're extremely supportive of this program. I have absolute latitude to run this program as I choose to run this program. There are people who are in this business, who are out of this business, who seem to think that their show is solely, if not wholly, about them. It's not. That's backwards. It's about your audience. If you don't respect your audience is going to go away. That doesn't mean you and your audience will always agree on all things. The audience is made up of millions and millions of people, you folks, and you may have different views than other people in the audience. But if you're not interesting, if you're not substantive, if you can't tell a joke, if you can't be real, if you're a fraud or a phony, you're going to lose your audience. And you should. There's one creep who can't hold a job in radio, who runs around going on who has sold out, who doesn't meet his standards and so forth. I don't know who this loser is. Pops up at talk show events, can't hold a job. He knows nothing about me. Zero. And yet the liberal media turned to him to critique me and others. I also do not believe that going through a gestalt round of interviews and so forth with liberal media is honest. Because that suggests to me that you're seeking, what are you seeking? You're seeking some kind of acknowledgement from them, now that you're trashing yourself and your audience, that, okay, you're a good guy. You really are a good guy. We're sorry. We misunderstood. I can tell you for myself, there's none of this kind of thinking. There's no positioning. There's none of it. Mr. Producer, open your microphone. You didn't even know I was going to get it. How long have you been with me now?
Oh, we got about 14 years.
14 years. And I've been doing this, what, 15 years?
Yep.
Okay. Have you ever known me to say, I need to do this and do that, to position myself, to get my audience to do this, to try and increase ratings? Have you ever? Tell them the truth.
Not once.
Have you?
No.
In fact, have I not said to you sometimes, well, I'll take a hit, but I got to say what I got to say?
You do that a lot.
I do it a lot. All right, thank you. And Rich is the greatest executive producer. Loyal, smart, competent, great guy. As is Mr. Call Screener, Charlie. But when you're on the air 3 hours a day, 5 days a week for the most part, you can't fake it. And if you do fake it, the people know you're a faker. It's different than dancing and singing and being a comedian or doing magic tricks. You can't hide. You can't hide. You either have it between the ears or you don't have it between the ears. And you either have a heart and soul for this or you don't have a heart and soul for this. It's not about the host and what the host wants. The host has to be himself, or should be, has to be herself, or should be. But you decide. You decide. And by the way, that's like everything else. Like everything else. So I'm pointing this out because Mr. Producer will tell you, Mr. Call Screener will tell you, my family will tell you, the executives in this company will tell you. I come to this microphone with the absolute desire to convey exactly what I'm thinking and exactly what I'm feeling, sometimes more articulate than other times. And if I or you are struggling with something, you'll know that too. One of the things that I've tried to do with this program is take my show and hopefully this industry in a bit of a different direction. I don't really talk about that. But I decided, you know what? At least from my perspective, this is an incredible format. And for me, an incredible opportunity to convey really important things. To engage in really important things. To to be more activist rather than passive. To use this as a format to spread liberty, at least to understand liberty, and our history, and our heritage, and certain philosophers, and certain founders, and so forth and so on. Nobody viewed talk radio that way, or very few people, as I understand it. And yet, to do that in a way which isn't so preachy and so repetitive as to become boring and monotonous. So I'm only pointing this out right now because, well, you have a right to know. Because there's others out there, they're on I don't know what they're doing. They find some local hosts in Wisconsin who's on the attack. Guy has spent years as a rhino behind a microphone, and now he's on the attack. There's a guy who can't hold a job over at Mediaite, a vile, poisonous punk, makes allegations. That's why he's not on the radio anymore, because you have rejected him. You have rejected him. Others going around apologizing for who they are and what they were this year, last year, the year before. Well, just be yourself. And I would tell this to everybody, not that you need me to lecture you. It's always important to be yourself. And if you need to improve yourself, improve yourself. We always do, right? But be yourself. Don't be a phony. And let the chips fall where they may. But on the other hand, don't go out of your way to piss people off. Don't go out of your way to turn people off. Because you will. You'll succeed. Respect your audience. Respect if you're in business. Respect your customer. Respect the consumer. If you're a politician, respect the American people. That's what it's about, in my opinion. That's what it's about. Now, I take on issues that most people, many in this business, would think are monotonous. If I talk about John Locke, if I talk about Alexis de Tocqueville, if I talk about Karl Marx, if I talk about some of the progressive intellectuals, Crowley, as an example, or get into those things, most people wouldn't touch it. They just assume do laugh tracks and go through the websites. I got it. I understand. And that's okay. That's what they do. But I respect you. And I think, at the end of the day, you're sick of all the giddy, goofy, gossipy talk. By the way, not that everybody does it. I'm just saying. There is a lot of it. There's a lot of it. So that's what this program's about. Having fun. Entertaining. I'm not an entertainer, but entertaining. Substantive. So when you turn the program off, you can say, you know what, I learned something. The guy pissed me off, but I actually learned something. Or maybe I hadn't thought about that. I agree with it. Whatever it is. The other thing is the time slot I'm in, especially on the East Coast, 6 p.m. Eastern live, is the toughest time slot in radio. Many of you are in your cars. You just want to put on some music. It's a long day. You've had a rough day at the office or wherever on the assembly line. Or you're at home eating dinner, and you want to be with the kids, if you have kids or grandkids. Or, depending on the time of the year, you're at Little League, or maybe you're watching baseball, watching basketball, listening to it, whatever it is. This is the toughest time on radio. The toughest time on radio. Because of the competition. Not from other talk show hosts. The competition from life. The competition from life. If I were a mid-morning host or afternoon, mid-afternoon, you don't have that stuff going on. You just do at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And yet, you're here. Millions of you. Millions of you. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
know, the battle for liberty, the battle to restore constitutional republicanism in the face of everything that's going on, requires a lot of courage. You all have a lot of courage. And there are people who simply see the world in this country quite differently than the rest of us. And it's not an honest debate. They want to use the levers of power in ways that are destructive of our liberty. And they've been succeeding. Those of us who push back shouldn't be apologizing. It doesn't mean we'll always agree. But remember Thomas Paine and the Sunshine Patriots. It means that we have to be smarter and more resolute than the people who control the government, control the media, control Hollywood, and all the rest. Again, it doesn't mean we'll always agree, but fundamentally we share the same beliefs and values, principles, and that's important. You and I, we're not dividing the country. We're not dividing the country. We know who's dividing the country. The left is dividing the country. They don't believe in fair debate. They don't want to engage in a fair debate. They want to use the iron fist. That's their history. Not only in this country, but in other countries. That's their ideology. To impose by force, soft and otherwise, their will. And so the men and the boys are being separated from each other. The women and the girls are being separated from each other. That is, those who comprehend what's going on and still have the backbone to take it on. There's no ulterior motive. That's the motive. Chances are you use the same password for multiple web accounts, right? Internet users aren't careful when creating passwords. They use the same login credentials for different web accounts, and passwords aren't strong enough. Now, this bad habit increases the risk of hacks and identity theft. One solution is to install a password manager, a tool that stores passwords for every site, is easily accessible, and adds security. Identity theft is America's fastest growing crime. It happens when thieves use your information to pretend that they're you. They can buy things on your credit or liquidate bank accounts. LifeLock scans hundreds of millions of transactions every second. If they detect your information, they send you an alert. If you have a problem, a U.S.-based agent will work to fix it. Free credit monitoring only alerts you to changes in credit. No one can prevent all identity theft or monitor all transactions at all businesses. But LifeLock is absolutely the best identity theft protection available anywhere. So go to LifeLock.com or call 1-800-LifeLock. But use promo code Levin, that's Levin, L-E-V-I-N, so you get 10% off your LifeLock membership. Visit LifeLock.com, save 10% with promo code Levin, or call 1-800-LifeLock. You know, people in the public eye, they don't like being called names. They don't like being going on social media or websites and reading comments that are incredibly dishonest and vicious. They don't like it. I don't like it. And so I don't do it anymore. I don't read it. But on some people, it wears on them after a while. And they say, what the hell have I done? I get on TV, I get behind a microphone, I give my opinion, I try to influence people, that's fine. But now all of a sudden my wife is this, and my kids are this, and my dog is that, and I'm a sellout for this, and I'm... People don't like that. Do you like that in your own life? But some people in public life handle it better than others. No brag, I handle it very well. I really do. It just doesn't bother me that much. What about the last 2 or 3 weeks? When the media, in the aggregate, intentionally lie about what I said. The Associated Press intentionally lies about what I said. It's a wire service that goes to thousands of news outlets. So headline after headline, it's repeated and repeated and repeated, and it still is. And it will be forever. It's on the Internet. Conspiracy theorist. Not a conspiracy theorist. right-wing hack. Not a right-wing hack. But it doesn't matter. It's out there. And there's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing anyone can do about it. Except fight back, push back, and get the truth out. But for some people, it's too much. It's too much. But I view my role as defending our principles, yours and mine, and defending our integrity, yours and mine, and defending our way of life, yours and mine. And I'm blessed to be able to do this. This is really the only format. This and starting our own digital TV business. It's really the only way right now to do it. It just is. Anyway, the reason I'm commenting on this isn't because of I want to take you through a Gestalt session. I'm sick of reading about these other guys who seem to be, I'm sorry I did this, and then what do you sell out? All these other guys in this business. Just buck it up. All right, folks, I will be back in just a few minutes.
Broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
John McCain on the floor of the Senate yesterday attacks Rand Paul. Cut 6, go. Make that cut 5, go.
If there is objection, and I note the senator from Kentucky on the floor, I will say before I read this, if there is objection, you are achieving the objectives of Vladimir Putin. You're achieving the objectives of trying to dismember this small country that has already been the subject of attempted coup. I have no idea why anyone would object to this, except that I will say, if they object, they are now carrying out the desires and ambitions of Vladimir Putin, and I do not say that lightly.
Mr. President? Senator from Kentucky.
I object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President, I note the senator from Kentucky leaving the floor without justification or any rationale for the action that he has just taken. That is really remarkable. That a senator blocking a treaty that is supported by the overwhelming number, perhaps 98 at least, of his colleagues, would come to the floor and object and walk away. And walk away. The only conclusion you can draw when he walks away is he has no argument to be made. He has no justification for his objection to having a small nation be part of NATO that is under assault from the Russians. So I repeat again, the senator from Kentucky is now working for Vladimir Putin. I yield the floor.
Working for Vladimir Putin. Okay. Rand Paul on the morning schmo today. Cut 6, go.
Well, I think he makes a really, really strong case, for term limits. I think maybe he's past his prime. I think maybe he's gotten a little bit unhinged. I do think that when we talk about NATO, there can be a rational discussion about the pros and cons of expanding it. We currently have combat troops in about 6 nations. We have troops actively just stationed in probably a couple dozen others. We have a $20 trillion debt. And one of my favorite articles of the last couple of years was one that talked about the angry McCains. And if we put active troops and got involved in combat where McCain wants us to be, they put a little angry McCain on the globe globe on the map, and it's virtually everywhere. So his foreign policy is something that would greatly endanger the United States, greatly overextend us, and there has to be the thought whether or not it's in our national interest to pledge to get involved with war if Montenegro has an altercation with anyone.
That's fair enough with respect to whether Montenegro should be in NATO. That's a debate that can be had. But they're both wrong, in my humble opinion. John McCain has a very radical view of foreign policy, and I don't believe in the radical interventionism that he preaches. On the other hand, Rand Paul is very much the isolationist, even though he would deny it. He is. He is a chip off the old block. I am not a code pink Republican, nor am I a radical interventionist, and I don't think most of you are either of those either. And yet these are the two wings within the Republican Party. You can have a very prudential view of foreign policy, muscle up the United States military, which we absolutely must do, recognize there are real threats that we face, which there absolutely are, recognize that it's not American, quote-unquote, imperialism or colonialism or interventionism that is the cause of so much destitution and genocide in the world today. Quite the contrary. So I reject the code pink republicanism, and I reject the John McCain radical interventionism, as I believe most of you do. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be, prepared for anything and everything. And we should start taking steps to address what China's doing, what Russia's doing, what Iran's doing, and what North Korea's doing. And no, that doesn't mean you shoot nuclear weapons into their capitals. That's stupid. But it does mean you develop strategies with your allies to address them. So I think both these guys are kind of kooky when it comes to foreign policy. But I do find McCain in particular, even more than Rand Paul, very problematic. He takes cheap shots all the time. On Cruz, on Trump, on Rand Paul. I think some of his positions have been very, very troubling over the years. McCain-Feingold, his attack on free speech. His position on immigration, very troubling. Leader of the Gang of Eight. I have a very long memory about these things. During George W. Bush's presidency, early on, he talked about not balancing the budget on the backs of the poor, and he opposed many of the tax cuts early on in the Bush administration. John McCain's been wrong an awful lot about a lot of things. And he doesn't really like to debate. He likes to go on liberal media and take shots, and that's what he does. And there ought to be term limits. There ought to be term limits for guys like him and guys like Orrin Hatch. Orrin Hatch wants to run again. Orrin Hatch will be 83 when he runs. Orrin Hatch lied to the people of Utah last time around when he said, and he said it to me, and he said it to you, that this would be his last term. Well, Donald Trump urged me to run, so I'm running. Really? That's pathetic. You're running because you're a liar. And not only that, you're a pretty poor senator. You're a pretty poor senator. I remember the early days, Senator Hatch, when you were in the Senate, fighting for the right things. Now, you're just part of the wallpaper. You go along. You don't want to disturb the filibuster rule, the hell with the Constitution. Yeah. Well aware of you. And then you got McConnell there. Everything's dead on arrival with McConnell. Guy doesn't take a leadership position on anything except attacking conservatives. And I've done what I can to fight him. Now this Trump budget, most of which I support, not all of it. I don't believe in reviving the export-import. I don't get that, this corporate welfare stuff. Well, it's pro-American, making America great again. No, it's not. Capitalism is pro-American, making America great again. Entrepreneurship is pro-American, making America great again. Competition is pro-American, making America great again. Low taxes, low regulations, that's making America great again. Yes, and this Export-Import Bank, which has now been killed off, John Boehner tried to defend it, the Wall Street Journal in many respects tried to defend it and so forth, finally killed off, and now they want to revive it. You watch, there'll be bipartisanship for that, just like with the infrastructure spending. And the President of the United States, no doubt with our buddy Steve Bannon's prodding, keeps bringing up Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson, who destroyed the economy. And it fell into the lap of Martin Van Buren. Why don't they bring up Herbert Hoover? Herbert Hoover was a great protectionist. Herbert Hoover put the biggest tariff regime in place of any president in modern history. Why don't they bring up Herbert Hoover? Why are they talking about Andrew Jackson? Professor John Eastman was on this program, and he explained Andrew Jackson vehemently opposed federal infrastructure programs and vetoed them. So the parallel isn't Andrew Jackson. Excuse me. The parallel, if that's the road they're going to take, is Herbert Hoover. I'm also confused about other positions that have been taken on trade, quite frankly. Buy American, they tell us. Buy American. You know, when you buy a car, a Chevy or whatever, it's not all American made. Parts are made overseas in many cases. The rubber comes from overseas in many cases. Remember that story, I penciled? Just a pencil. How much is involved in terms of material, in terms of production, in terms of transportation, all the countries involved, all the workers here and abroad involved in just making a pencil? Well, multiply that times 1 million, and then you have the making of an automobile. All the material doesn't come from the United States. So when they say buy American, what does that mean? Even if you want to buy American, how do you buy American? Do you buy American oil? How do you buy American oil? You buy an American car because it has an American label on it? But all the elements of a car are not American made. And what do we mean by fair trade? What does that mean? I'll tell you again, we have over 12,000 tariffs in place. We've put them in place, not because of fair trade, but because of politics, through and through. Some senator or some congressman wanted to protect this, that, or the other. Why do we have a 350% tariff on tobacco? Why do we have a 150% tariff on peanuts? Why do we have 12,000 tariffs? Well, I support fair trade, not free trade. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means, Mark, that if a country puts a 20% tariff on our stuff, we should put a 20% tariff on their stuff. Really? Now, of course, when somebody exports into our country, they have to pay state sales taxes for those states that have sales taxes. But wouldn't fair trade also mean that whatever regulations that we put on our businesses, whatever regulations, environmental, affirmative action, minimum wage, whatever it is, doesn't that mean that should apply to the employees and the businesses overseas? Then we have true fair trade. Wouldn't it be better to have free trade agreements so they open up their markets and we can open our markets? Because the American worker is the best worker on the face of the earth. Isn't that how you level the playing field, quote unquote? I only bring these things up because I think they're necessary. If I don't bring them up, nobody else is going to bring them up. We say we want fair trade. Well, if we want fair trade, we have to reduce the imposition of costs, taxes, regulations on our domestic industries. That's how you create fair trade. So our guys have a chance. So our gals have a chance. But this is what I wanted to ask you. I asked it like a month ago. On the one hand, it appears the administration's position is we must drive down the price of pharmaceuticals. We must drive down the price of drugs manufactured in the United States. I mean, you can get them overseas, they say, for a cheaper price. Well, of course, they steal our patents. It's not hard to understand. They steal them. Okay, fine. On the other hand, we want to get up the price of certain other material, steel and so forth, because we want to protect our steel industry, right? And, of course, we want to protect the unions. Is that not schizophrenic? We want to keep the price of steel or increase the price of steel, but on the other hand, we want to drive down the price of pharmaceuticals. And then I ask you this. Is that fair to the employees that work for pharmaceutical companies? Aren't they Americans too? Don't they have families too? Or, at least as a logical matter, if we're going to drive down the price of pharmaceuticals, why don't we drive down the price of steel and everything else? Or this one. Why 12,000 tariffs? Why not 15,000 tariffs? Why peanuts and not something else? What's that all about? What does this word fair mean when we talk about trade? What does that mean? We seem to think that we have a free trade policy on our side here. We don't. We're very protectionist. Very protectionist. What I'm saying is, let's have a little more free trade. We're never going to have absolute free trade, but how about a little bit more? That might be a good idea. All right, I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
You know, I guess we all bring our own experiences to economics. My experience with my family is really quite simple. My parents started their own very modest, small business when they were young. My mother had been a teacher, and she quit the normal teaching profession, you know, teaching in an elementary school 20, 30 years and returned. And she and my father started a nursery school. And they did everything. And they worked 20 hours a day. And they didn't ask anybody for anything. They didn't get any government loans. They weren't subsidized by the government. They weren't on food stamp. None of it. And early on, they had 3 boys. My father, with his own hands, built much of the school. And the furniture. And many of the toys. And the playground. And the picnic benches, because in the summertime they had a day camp. And we always had station wagons when we were young. Because among other things, he would get up at 6 in the morning and pick up the kids for summer camp, he and the other counselors, and bring them to camp, and then bring them home at night, in the evening. Same with the nursery school. They worked their hearts out. If a fence needed to be painted, he painted it. If the grass needed to be cut, he cut it. If the swimming pool needed to be painted, and there were 2 pools, they painted it. My mother was in charge of the lunches. She made the lunches. There was no school lunch program. The mimeograph machine, they'd put out the menu, they'd put out the events, they'd take the kids bowling, they would do everything. They didn't have a union. They weren't part of a major corporation. They didn't ask for tariffs. They didn't ask for protection. They sank or swim of their own. And the income was modest. Modest. But it was enough. Then they moved on to their own little store that they started. There were some tough years going through a recession. The brick and mortar store. They didn't ask for anything. They didn't get anything. That's what they did. I'll be right back.
11.
Here's what I would do if I were in the administration on this judge problem. And it is a judge problem. We have 2 rogue judges who are violating their oaths. I've talked about long-term matters, how to address it as best that we can. Congress removing this issue from the jurisdiction of the lower courts as well as Convention of States. These are, if even possible, down the road. But what can be done now? What the administration should do, in my opinion, is full steam ahead. That is with the court challenges, and let the chips fall where they may. Full steam ahead in the circuits. Take it to the Supreme Court. At the same time, the president should pick up the phone and call that lousy Mitch McConnell and tell him, let's move on Gorsuch as quickly as possible. Let's get him on the court. That we can't wait any longer. This rope-a-dope from Mr. Dope, that is Mr. Schumer, has got to be put to an end. And it's time that the Republicans take control of the Senate and start ramming some stuff through. Roll this clown Schumer. I mean, how hard is it, folks? Seriously. So get our justice on there. Hopefully he'll do okay. I don't know a lot about him, frankly. But it can't, how much worse can it get? And then simultaneously push hard. File your emergency motions. Let's go. Take it to the circuit. 3-judge panel. Let the chips fall where they may. If then you have it, the court hears it en banc. That is, 20 of them in the Ninth Circuit or whatever number. So be it. Lose, and then get it to the Supreme Court. And if in the end you lose in the Supreme Court, you've effectively done all you can under existing conditions. Now, existing conditions are very problematic for those of us who believe in the Constitution and liberty, which is why I talk about Convention of States all the time. But that's the situation. Have you visited Blindster.com yet? Now, they're my favorite window treatment company. That's blindster.com. Blindster.com. The selection of custom-made blinds, shutters, and shades is amazing. And their prices are the lowest anywhere. But what really stands out to me at Blindster.com is the customer service statement right there on their website. It says, we are passionate about the quality of our products and the satisfaction of our customers. Their commitment to you is up front and center. Owner and entrepreneur Kyle Cox, who I've gotten to know, and his staff have a reputation for truly caring about your happiness. And I've never seen anything like it, frankly, including their fit or free guarantee. That means even if you accidentally measure incorrectly, Kyle will remake your blinds for free. You only pay shipping. Now, I love entrepreneurs like Kyle who put customers first, simply because it's the right thing to do. So if you can use a tape measure and a screwdriver, you can install the highest quality custom shade shutters and blinds. And get this, ready? You get a whopping 35% discount when you enter promo code MARK, my name. Promo code MARK at checkout at Blindster.com. That's blinds, TER.com. Promo code MARK. Get your 35% off. Mr. Producer, I have had, as you know, all-night difficulty with my computer, with AOL, with the call screen. Who do we have on our call screen that you think I should speak to? WABC, Daniel, Edison, New Jersey. Go.
Hi, Mark. I'm a big fan of yours. I just have 3 words to say, and that is Men in Black. Everyone needs to read Men in Black.
My first book.
Is that your first book? It's the only book I have.
My first book.
It's an amazing thing. You know, you hear people scream that the judges are terrible. This book you actually understand why. You understand where judicial review came from. You understand where they started. You know, taking the crowbar to the Constitution. Mm-hmm. So all I have to say is, you know, nowadays, you know, you left off in the book with with what's going to happen with same-sex marriage, and we see what happened with that. And
unfortunately, I was right, wasn't I?
Yes, it was quite prophetic, I have to admit. Not that I have to admit.
Look at the immigration chapter. Same thing.
Yes.
The courts have nationalized the immigration issue. They have nationalized these cultural and social issues. They talk about, state sovereignty and federalism, and states act, and they act within their constitutional rights, federal and state, and if you have enough justices who disagree, well, guess what? The justices trump everything, apparently.
It's absolutely wild. Unfortunately, I have to say I was a little bit depressed after reading it, but educated nonetheless.
Well, read the Liberty Amendments, because the Liberty Amendments.
I know that's the last. That's a book I got to get. I heard about the book from Dan Bongino, so I got to thank him. Yes. Men in Black, that is. And the other books I got to get, I have to say, clear writing from the beginning, from the sources, amazing. So thank you.
Well, my pleasure. Don't hang up. We'll give you a Liberty Amendments. That'll put a smile on your face, because I lay out what I believe are things that we can do. You, my beloved audience, me, and even beyond. So there are ways to address these things. They're hard. They're hard. That's the way it is. There's nothing I can do about that, but they do exist. And I'm truly excited about my next book. I do believe it's my best book ever, Rediscovering Americanism. And the subtitle is The Tyranny of Progressivism. And it's on Amazon now. It doesn't come out till July 4th. So what's that, 3.5 months from now, Independence Day? But that's what it is. For those of you who really want to understand deeply what has transpired, what is transpiring, what came before, and really help you to crystallize your views and your principles and your thoughts about events despite everything swirling around, all the static and so forth. I really sincerely believe this is going to be the book. And it was a tough book to write. When I write these books, I would say 80 to 90% of what I research, I don't use. Because my job's not just, as an author, is not just to flop in everything I read. Not only wouldn't it work, it would be monotonous. I don't even know what I would be able to write. It's to try and really discern the best of the best, and then try to whittle it down in a way that makes sense, and develop a rational theme. And so I think this book really accomplishes that, and this book, I think, is going to open your eyes. I don't mean on a superficial level. You already know what's going on in this country. I mean, well, why is this going on? Who are the people behind this? What were their arguments? Why were so many people duped? Why are so many people duped today? What about Americanism? I hear these words about nationalism and progressivism and liberalism and all. What is this? What is it about Americanism? Is it unique to America? That sort of thing. And it intertwines or interweaves liberty, society, the civil society, the rule of law, the Constitution, private property rights, capitalism, and so many other things. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. All these things go together, and when one is under attack, they're all under attack. I even spend time defining liberty. What do we mean by liberty? What do we mean by liberty? Now, it may seem simple, but it's not so simple. And why do some people degrade it or reject it or interpret it in ways that are completely hostile to its original purpose? Well, these are things that I tackle in this book, and we can tackle together. And I can't wait till it comes out so we can discuss it. And no, it's not about, this senator or this congressman or the Trump presidency or anything like that. I mean, you can project into these things, but no, it's bigger than that. It's broader than that. And of course, I not only look back and at the present, I look at the future. So these are the kinds of books, at least this book, that does require you to think and to take your time when you read it. It discusses things that you're not going to have discussed in most colleges or universities, or high schools for that matter, and certainly not in major media. And once again, it is a different format that allows me and you to address these things differently. And once again, I don't want to waste your time or your money. And so I put a lot of time into it. So after you read it, I'm hoping you'll say, holy mackerel, wow, that was worth it. And finally, I wasn't even intending to discuss this, but here we are. This is the first book I've written in the way that I wrote this book. I wrote this book from beginning to end over a period of many months, flowing from one point to the next, one historical point to the next, one factual point to the next, one argument to the next. Those who are promoting Americanism and those who are promoting the opposite, and just telling the story and moving it through. And it wasn't until I finished that I went back and broke it into chapters as best as I could. Because people want starting and stopping points when they read. All right, I'm done chapter 1, done chapter 2. I even said to my publisher, I said, I don't know that I'm going to have any chapters. And then we decided that might be too overwhelming. So I broke it into chapters. 7 chapters. All right, let's take a call. Let us go to Chuck, Rockwall, Texas, the great WBAP. Go.
Hey, Mark. I've been a long-time listener and viewer.
Thank you.
And my family and I appreciate everything that you do. My question is this. Is entropy actually on the side of progressivism and statism, or does it just seem that way? And if it is, why?
This is a very good question. And by the way, it's one that I do address in the book, too. Well, look, if you look at what happened to Greece, more specifically, if you look what happened to Athens, and then you look what happened to Rome, and you look at the atrophy of the British Empire and so forth, and you look what's happening at us. Milton Friedman said, and he wasn't the first, he wasn't the only one, and he won't be the last, liberty is the actual practice of liberty, the actual establishment and existence of free societies. That's the exception in human history, not the rule. Look around the world, 190-some countries. How many of them are republics? How many of them have some notion of freedom? Most of them do not. So while man may yearn to be free, there are certain men who yearn to control other men. And so this battle between liberty and tyranny is infinite. It's infinite. And to answer your question, yes. In a free society, it's much easier to promote those things that encourage a centralized government, authoritarian leadership, because of the promises they make. Because of the promises they make. So here we are in the greatest, freest country on the face of the earth, where even the poorest of poor people can walk into a grocery store, right, and buy food, which is unheard of in human history. And the debate is about inequality, and the debate is about jealousy, and people are angry. Some of them are even violent. And it goes on and on and on, as if we're living in some third world backward society where the vast majority of people are poor, the vast majority of people have no clothing, no housing, they go without. And in this country, the vast majority of people have automobiles and cars and toasters and washing machines and dishwashers and air conditioning and running water, clean water, and running toilets and so forth and so on. And so when you're preaching tyranny to people who really are living better than any people have ever on the face of the earth, and you're preaching promises, utopian statism, I called it in Ameritopia, it's alluring to people. It's alluring to people. Because the more equality we have, the more every little slight or every little difference is magnified. Have you noticed that?
Absolutely.
And this is part of the problem. Anyway, Chuck, thank you for your question. Excellent question. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
We got some interesting calls up here who disagree with me on a number of things, and so we will take them, assuming they hold on. But first, I wish this bag under my eye would just go away. Now, if that sounds like you every morning, you're not alone. Bags and puffiness under the eyes are a problem for millions of American men and women, unless you use Genucel, the plant stem cell treatment from Chamonix. Then you'll have no bags and puffiness. Now, listen to Susan from New Jersey. This is what she wrote. She said, I've been using Genucel for a couple of months. The puffiness around my eyes, gone. Even the crow's feet and small lines have disappeared. I love your product. But not only Susan, folks. My mom loves Genucel. Other family members love Genucel. A cardiologist buddy of mine, Teddy, he loves Genucel. It's true. It's true. And with its instant effects, you'll see results in the first 12 hours or your money back, guaranteed. Call now and you'll save big on Genucel's risk-free, limited-time offer. Call 800-SKIN-604, 800-SKIN-604. Just give it a try. Plus, right now during the Chamonix Spring Clearance Event, Chamonix will give you an instant $50 coupon while supplies last. Now is the perfect time to dive in, folks. Here's how you do it. Call 800-SKIN-604. That's 800-SKIN-604. All right, Gary, Duluth, Minnesota, the great WWTC country. Go.
Hey, Mark. Not a very long listener, but I do enjoy your show.
Thank you.
I just want to call and comment on some of these things that are going on, like the budget that was released today or yesterday from the president. And one of the items that stuck with me was, why eliminate Meals on Wheels? This one I just don't understand. This one is to the crux of older people need it, yes. But why?
Well, let me ask you a few questions. I don't pretend to know a lot about Meals on Wheels. Let me ask you a question. How much federal money goes into Meals on Wheels? I thought that was mostly private.
I do too, but it's funded by the state and funded by the federal government.
How much money?
State. I don't know the exact money.
When did it start? When did it start?
I have no idea.
How many people does it feed?
Again, I don't have all those numbers.
Okay, so my only point in raising this with you is we have no idea, do we, you and I?
No, because
it's like Head Start. Head Start is an untouchable, but then there have been studies on Head Start that say it really is ineffective, and you try and cut $1 out of Head Start.
Here's part of my frustration is Meals on Wheels, food stamps, school lunch programs are all combined with the Farm Bill, which makes no sense to me.
I don't know. Meaning what?
Well, meaning what? How do you differentiate between the dollars? I mean, you do, but why is it all lumped into the Farm Bill?
Well, if they were voting on every single little program, they'd be doing this endlessly. But that said, let me ask you a question. Are you concerned about the trillions and trillions of dollars in debt?
I am.
So where do we cut?
Well, for example...
should we cut Social Security?
I don't think everybody...
Should we cut Medicare?
I don't... How about if we just...
Listen to me. Should we cut Medicaid?
Absolutely not.
Well, what do you want to cut?
How about if we cut some of the foreign funding that we're giving out?
Foreign funding is what, $20 billion? We're talking about trillions and trillions. I'll be right back.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. I have an idea, Mr. Producer. And America? I don't know if anybody else has come up with it or not. It doesn't really matter, but I'll give you my idea. As you know, I prefer vouchers to these massive Soviet-style government entities that our federal government creates with our politicians. Long time ago, I said we ought to give vouchers to our vets. They can use them at a Veterans Administration hospital if they like their hospital and they like their doctor and so forth, or they should be able to use it anywhere they want to. I'm thinking that now on health care generally. Just hear me out. I'm sure it's not perfect, but let me just throw it out there. Rather than constantly expanding Medicaid, which is going broke anyway, people will be vetted to truly determine if they're below poverty. And they will be looked at to see what kind of assets they have, so they're not squirreling money away. Because you and I shouldn't have to subsidize people who have big homes or 3 cars or whatever, have vacations. No. True poor people. Here's what we do. We give them a voucher. Now, the amount of the voucher is obviously going to be very critical. But it can only be used for health care. And again, I'm not writing this here as I speak. I'm just thinking out loud. Rather than all this redistribution through Medicaid and so forth and so on, you may qualify for a voucher. And it has to be a reasonable amount. Now, what should the voucher be for? To go to any hospital you want, Mr. Producer? To go to any doctor you want? No. You know what the voucher would be for, Mr. Producer and America? To buy health insurance. Private health insurance. You get a voucher to buy a health insurance policy if you're below the poverty level. Not a voucher to go to any doctor you want, not a voucher to go to any hospital you want, a voucher to purchase private health insurance. That way, we can unleash these businesses to create all kinds of health insurance policies, which is what I keep pressing for. Catastrophic care, care that's very limited, that maybe very healthy young people would want. College students, as an example, as there used to be. Maybe somebody could purchase much, much more. You'll get a voucher if you are under the poverty level. And if you want to contribute more money to the purchase of a policy to get more extensive coverage, that's perfectly fine. That's up to you. But instead of the money flowing into a massive federal bureaucracy with massive paperwork and all the rest, we cut out a lot of the middlemen. We can't cut out all of them. In other words, we cut out a lot of the mob, the bureaucracy. And we're not doing this because we need to create anything. We're doing this as a way of trying to solve a problem. What do you think of that idea, Rich? In other words, yeah, we give a limited voucher for truly poor people to purchase private health care. Or it could be for-profit or not-for-profit, like Blue Cross Blue Shield and so forth, but it's private. Rather than massively increasing these Medicaid and all the rest of it, these programs that cannot withstand this forever. Now, I'm not throwing this out like this is the end-all and be-all. It's just an idea I have. I argued for it with the vets years ago, and it's been picked up by people now. Hey, I have an idea. And it came from and comes from my experience with Landmark Legal Foundation, our wonderful conservative legal foundation, where we litigated for vouchers when it came to Milwaukee and comes to inner city, in particular, poor neighborhoods, where kids are forced to go to the local school, which in many cases is just not up to par. And I think more and more this approach should be considered. I really do. I think more and more this approach should be considered. So let me repeat it again so the backbenchers on Fox and other places can repeat it. And backbenchers in my business. You notice, Mr. Producer, over the years I've talked about this silent coup that's taking place. I've been attacked by the media for bringing it up in the last few weeks. These words have a way of resonating. They just do. But I'm thinking that the voucher, again, I'm not talking about the VA, I'm talking about people who supposedly, and in reality in cases, cannot afford health care. They get a voucher to purchase a private insurance policy. And they can add to it. Now, on top of that, if you have true health savings accounts, that is where a person can put money in there and save for a catastrophe or save for whatever they want as it applies to health care without limits. That is, as long as it's health care related. What's wrong with that? Again, it takes the burden off of you and me. It takes the burden off of the federal taxpayer. It gets more and more of the bureaucracy out of the system. Less and less red tape. A voucher, a savings account, and it puts responsibility where it belongs, on the individual. On the individual. No more excuses for people when it comes to pre-existing conditions. Every healthy person would be able to purchase a health care policy. Now, I'm not saying you get rid of the employer plans or this plan or that plan. Fine, keep all that stuff. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about this 20%, this 20 million, this 5% or whatever it is of the population. That's what I'm talking about. Addressing that. And so I'd be curious to know what you think about that. I'm sure there are holes in it, but to me it's, I think, a very useful starting point. Lynn, Las Vegas, Nevada, on the Mark Levin app. Go!
Hi. Oh, God, I can't believe I got through. Yes, I was listening to your Medicaid idea, and I think it sounds excellent. I think it reminds me of what the way the education vouchers are being used for. So, yeah, why not? And you should talk about this a lot. You really should.
Where people would buy policies in the private sector. For-profit, non-profit, they can make their own choice, buy whatever they want. But they would buy policies, and they could add to it if they want to, as well as have these savings accounts on the side. I know everybody can't afford them. Okay, fine, but we don't, in this country, work towards the lowest common denominator. We want opportunities for all people. And it seems to me, again, it takes the burden off of other people, other taxpayers, the federal bureaucracy, and it's more direct. I think I will talk about it more. All right, Lynn, I appreciate your call. We'll take a little early break here so we can have a longer segment. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Let's go to Mike, Redondo Beach, California, on the Mark Levin app. Go.
Hi, Mark. I love your voucher plan. You know, I read in the Wall Street Journal recently that people on Medicaid, their health outcomes are no better than people who are uninsured. So anybody who would attack this voucher plan as saying, well, we can't take away from people on Medicaid, they're already being taken away from because they are not getting any kind of benefit from being on Medicaid. It's the same as being uninsured. The study showed that people on private insurance are the people with the best health outcomes. This gets them onto private insurance and better health outcomes. Plus, there's so many doctors they can't even see on Medicaid, so many services not covered. This will allow them to have much more in the way of coverage, doctors that they want to see, not being turned away at the door because they're on Medicaid.
Wouldn't this have been, all the time the Republicans had to think about it, all the think tanks in Washington, D.C., don't you think something like this, something akin to this, it doesn't have to be exactly this, that they would have come up with it, would have thought about it? I'm sitting here during the break just thinking about it. I'm going, what are we doing? Let's find ways for these people to buy policies. Not run everything through the government, state, feds, all the rest of it. Let's get a lot of the expense of the bureaucracy out of this system. Let's strengthen the private sector. Let's create more choice where people want to pick the kinds of plans they want to choose, not of 1 or 2 or 3 plans. And individuals can use the voucher only to purchase a policy, or if they want to add more money to it, they can use the voucher and their money and buy a better or different policy and take that along with these health savings accounts. You know, the Republicans are proposing a health savings account. It's capped, and you can only buy the kind of policies that the government approves. Why is that?
Well, the establishment...
It's my money. Why can't I buy whatever the hell kind of policy I want?
Yeah, and especially, you know, they'll look at it as an attack on Medicaid and fail to tell people that Medicaid really is not doing anyone any good.
Well, rather than defending Medicaid, we should defend health care. Health care. Medicaid is a thing. You know, it's like the golden calf. Anyway,
that's
Mike.
The problem.
All right, thank you for your call. And Mike is right. You've got an entire bureaucracy built around this. Politicians who have invested their futures on this. They'll talk about, oh, you're privatizing Medicaid. Well, no. We are helping poor people purchase health insurance policies so they can get quality health care, and so the federal taxpayer doesn't go broke. Now, it's true that the federal taxpayer, you and me, are going to be subsidizing these purchases. But there'll be less subsidies involved, less government involved, and more private activity involved. That's the bottom line. Let's go to David, Emporia, Kansas, Sirius Satellite. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you doing tonight?
All right, my friend.
Hey, I'm an avid listener to your show when I can anyway.
Thank you.
Been listening to it for a long time, and I've always heard your idea about your healthcare savings accounts and everything like that.
No. The healthcare savings account is not my idea. I agree with it, and I would expand it. What I'm talking about today is a voucher for truly provable poor people to purchase private health care rather than all this Medicaid stuff.
Right.
That is, they buy a health care policy.
Right, and my whole thing was I've never really heard, I mean, it could have happened, but I've never really heard anybody call in that's actually stated that healthcare savings accounts work, and I'm one of those people. So I guess I wanted to call in and just prove to people that it can work in the right situation.
Tell us about it.
I am 28 years old. I work on a wind farm down here in Kansas. And the way my policy works, I'm 28, I'm single, I don't have any kids. I would like to think I'm in relatively good health. So I don't really have a massive need for an expensive healthcare plan. Well, through my company I work for, we have an option for a high deductible healthcare plan, which runs me about $16 a paycheck. Well, because I elected that, I'm eligible for an HSA. So what I decided to do was I took the difference between what I'm paying for my high deductible plan and what I would have been paying for the middle of the road plan. And that's the amount I put in my HSA every month or every paycheck.
Which is about how much? I'm just curious.
About $45.
Okay.
And then on top of that, my company matches $20 of that, I believe, every check.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the math over the course of the year, combine what I'm putting in and what they're matching. At the end of the year, I will have enough money in that account to pay said high deductible if I need to.
Mm-hmm.
Like the math absolutely works. And for someone like me who doesn't go to the doctor all the time, or hardly ever for that matter, it works great.
Mm-hmm.
Now I understand there's people out there with families and whatnot that's just not applicable for because their needs are different. But I'm just incredibly
Yeah,
thrilled.
but so what? I mean, which is your point? Look, everybody can't buy into an IRA. Okay, so what? The point is you want to have options for people who have different lifestyles or in a different parts of their career.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. My parents, for instance, my dad was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. They lost their insurance 2 months later. This is after Obamacare, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Lost their insurance 2 months later. Was basically forced to sign up under the marketplace. They were still paying, after subsidies, they were still paying roughly $700 a month for my dad and my mom. Then they got a letter in October informing them as of January 1st, their Obamacare policy no longer was going to exist. And at this present time, they're still shopping, trying to find something that the closest.
And they're not alone. And they're not alone. I've heard about these sorts of things, and I have a family member that's about to face a similar situation where you have to pray to God that there's a policy out there that covers certain expensive medicines or certain types of diseases and so forth and so on, because these insurance companies are pulling out. They're going broke.
Mm-hmm. And that's
There's
the
no question about that.
My dad has 5 or 6 years left till he can get on Medicare.
Mm-hmm.
But
he can't get on Medicaid, can he?
Well, he could, but I mean, we're out here. We don't really. I mean,
See,
we're not.
What I'm saying is this: it's not a perfect. There is no perfect system, but if we could provide vouchers to people who are truly poor, the private healthcare market will expand enormously. If the government would stop telling insurance companies what kind of policies they're allowed to offer, there'd be all kinds of different kinds of policies at different levels for people to afford and so forth. And on your HSA, health savings account point, we should encourage it while people are healthy, while they're making money, just as we do with pensions, to put money into these plans, into these savings accounts. And so, like in the case of your father and your mother, $700 a month, if they had been able for 20 or 25 years to put some money away in these accounts, that would be far more affordable, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
All right, my friend. Excellent call. Very sharp guy, 28 years old. Yes, competition works. It's not inhumane. Fresh ideas work sometimes. They're not inhumane. All roads to compassion don't lead to Washington, D.C. In fact, many of them don't. In fact, misery leads to Washington, D.C. These bureaucracies balloon up, they muscle up, they take an enormous amount of money for administration. The red tape never ends. So you have shortages of doctors, shortages of nurses, shortages of hospital beds, shortages of medicines, longer lines, and yet everybody's got coverage. Oh, yippee-doo. I'll be right back. Let me tell you about Tisha, who owed the IRS $14,000. She was in a mess of trouble, and the IRS was aggressively pursuing her. So Tisha called my friends at Optima Tax Relief. That was a smart move. The Optima team quickly protected her, stopped the threats, stopped the aggressive collection actions, and went to work solving her tax problem. Not only did Tisha end up not paying the IRS $14,000, Optima got her a $7,000 refund. Case closed. Now, all outcomes are different, obviously, but if you owe the IRS back taxes or you haven't filed in some time, you know they're coming for you, right? They don't forget. And don't even think about going it alone. I trust Optima to solve your tax problems. They're A-plus rated and have resolved over $500 million in tax debt for their clients. Your call and consultation are free and confidential. Call 800-499-6300. 800-499-6300. That's 800-499-6300. I wouldn't wait. Now, this show, where we're talking about vouchers, where we're talking about changing the system from the centralized government leviathan that the progressive has created to a more market-oriented system that takes advantage of the private sector. I don't mean advantage in a negative way. I mean in a positive way. This is how we bring the world into our world rather than forcing everything into their world, I believe. So this is an idea that we need to spread. This is an idea that I will continue to talk about. It can be adjusted, it can be modified, so forth, but at the core, if somebody's actually poor, they're under the poverty level, they should get a voucher rather than Medicaid. And they should get a voucher to buy a private health care plan. And they can add to it with their own money, because it doesn't mean poor people have no money. Some don't, some do. But they can purchase a private health care plan. It could be a for-profit or a non-profit. It could be Blue Cross Blue Shield, could be Aetna, could be whatever it is. And at the same time, the insurance companies need to be free to conduct business across state lines and to offer different varieties of policies that are approved by the American people, not by the government. Not by the government. This is where we run into problems. If you're a poor person and you want to get a policy and you want to cover yourself and perhaps your family, you're going to look carefully at that policy if you get this voucher, and you may not want to cover, prostates. Let's say you're a single mother with 3 daughters. Why waste your money on that? Or maybe you want to emphasize catastrophic care, not everyday care. What's wrong with that? And so I think this helps bust up the bureaucracy, which is one of the reasons the bureaucracy will fight, the politicians will fight. But so what? Good ideas have resonance over time. Over time. Lane, Missoula, Montana, the great KVGO. Go.
Yes, sir, Mr. Levin. It's great talking to you. I love your show.
Sir. Thank you.
And, I was just thinking, I work with clients with traumatic brain injury that are on Medicaid, and I also work with wounded warriors.
Yeah.
And how I think the voucher is going to work is because it is so hard to get my clients in to see a doctor. I mean, it takes 2 to 3 months in advance to set up an appointment. And I really think this will help. Because these are the people.
And I'll tell you what else I think, Lane. We ought to encourage the graduation of more doctors. I'm watching as people try to become doctors, how difficult it is. Now, we want people, that go through the ringer. We don't want substandard medicine. But that said, I'm not talking about substandard medicine. I'm talking about really a bottleneck. It's so tight. You have really good students who get really good grades and get really good grades on that long medical exam that they have to take, and they can't get into medical schools.
I'm trying to get into nursing school myself, and I have great grades. I taught anatomy lab at Missoula College as a teaching assistant, and it's still hard to get in.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be hard, but it shouldn't be impossible.
Exactly.
And I think we have a lot of really smart young people like yourself who want to get into the medical profession, but it's very, very difficult. It's not because of a conspiracy of the AMA. It's because these schools need to open up a bit more. We need to look at these colleges and universities, these little fiefdoms. I'm telling you the truth. We pay a fortune as taxpayers and as parents and, of course, the students for these institutions. And yet, in order to get enough doctors out there, they need to go through them and so forth. We need more doctors and less lawyers is what we need.
Ain't that the truth?
All right, my friend, and I should know. I can see it up front close. Smitty, Sun City, Arizona, on the Mark Levin app. Go.
Oh, my goodness, Mark, I'm thrilled.
Thank
you.
In
the last month, I've talked to Mark Stein, Larry Arnn, and now you. This is incredible.
Isn't that amazing?
I've read your book, Plunder and Deceit. I've read Ameritopia. I've got a question for you on this Trump stuff that's coming out now, which is outrageous.
The budget?
No, these judges. If these judges have no legal standing, constitutional standing to come down with these decisions, why can't Trump just tell them to go pound sand and do it?
Because this has been going on since the failed impeachment of Samuel Chase, where Thomas Jefferson pressed to have the Associate Supreme Court Justice Samuel Chase impeached because of really a lousy decision, and it was a very political decision. And the whole world came down on Jefferson's head. It didn't work, and from then on, pretty much the position has been you can't impeach a judge, unless they're caught with a little girl or a little boy or something of that sort. So That's the problem. So we have 100 and some years now, well over 150 years of this going on, and the idea that the courts have the final word, and the idea that judicial review is in the Constitution, and the idea that you got to honor judges no matter what, and the idea that you can't criticize judges. Unfortunately, it's in the psyche of this society, and the politicians push it. And, we got to fight this. But as a practical matter, I can assure you, if Donald Trump did that, not only Democrats, but Republicans on the Hill would be calling for his impeachment. It would be his undoing. And so what we need to do is push the Senate, which, as I understand, is controlled by the Republicans, and get this Gorsuch on the Supreme Court as quickly as possible. And the Trump administration needs to just pound ahead, Ninth Circuit or no Ninth Circuit, and pound through to the Supreme Court. And they are on absolutely solid legal footing. That executive order that they prepared is superb. I read it. It is absolutely constitutional. When you have two knucklehead judges basically saying, hey, look, we watched the campaign, and we heard what they said. And regardless of what's in the executive order, we know they hate Muslims, you see. We know this is a backdoor way to stop Muslims, even though the most populated Muslim countries, the top Muslim countries, aren't even on the list. So these judges are Obama hacks. That's what they are. They're political hacks dressed up as judges. I've written about it over and over again. I wrote a whole book on it, Men in Black, and that's what we have. These are men and women of flesh and blood, and in too many cases, they are partisan hacks. And these two are partisan hacks. There's no question about it. All right, my friend, thank you for your call. Let's continue. Tony, a trucker friend in New Hampshire, Sirius Satellite, go.
Hello, Mark. One more point to this whole idea. By the way, your idea is absolutely brilliant.
The voucher idea?
Absolutely. The tens of billions of dollars in Medicare fraud every year, all that would have to be investigated by the insurance companies. They are very good.
I'm talking about Medicaid
fraud.
In this case. Medicaid,
Medicare, it's all
right.
Just wrought with fraud.
Well, the Inspector General of these programs is always releasing these reports, or the GAO, I should say, talking about all the enormous amount of fraud in these programs. But, I'm focused on Medicaid because the reason I'm focused on Medicaid is because I'm listening to these knuckleheads talking about we're going to expand it, we're not going to expand it. It'll be over. We'll expand it till 2020. Maybe we'll expand it the next year. I'm thinking, I have a better idea. Let's give a voucher to poor people, truly poor people, and let them buy private insurance, for-profit or non-profit private insurance, and let insurance companies offer many, many, many more plans that don't need the approval of bureaucrats and politicians in Washington, D.C. It's that simple. Now, I'm not saying in the end it would be that simple, but that's the core of the idea.
And it is a brilliant idea, but same thing with Medicare, Medicaid. It's a government program. It's all just filled with fraudulent cases. And the government...
You're right, but here's the difference. If you're a senior citizen today, you had money taken out of your income, and you were told that money was going to go into a trust fund to fund your health care needs in the future, called Medicare. Now, we know it doesn't work that way because they steal from these trust funds, Social Security and Medicare, and we know that Medicare is going to go broke in out years, 12 years, 15 years down the road, and we need to address that. But the people who are 75, 80, 85, 90 years old, they have no way out. So we can't abandon them all of a sudden. But what we can do is tell people who are 40, 45, and 50 years old, we're going to have to change this. But the people who are on it are the people who are on it, and they ought to get it. And the fact that the government lied to them, the government lied to them. But that doesn't mean we have to keep doing this to the point where the country sinks. Now, that said, Medicaid's different. Medicaid is a welfare program. Medicaid is a welfare program. Benefits are given to people who've never paid into, quote-unquote, Medicaid. We have illegal aliens on Medicaid. And so what I'm saying is, rather than this broad brush, let's address this if we can. And trust me, the Congress won't do what I'm saying anyway, but I think we need to begin to press these ideas. Thanks for your call, my brother. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
On MSLSD, what was it, last night, Mr. Producer? Joel Pollack of Breitbart, who's an old buddy of mine, and Chuck Todd, who I don't know. Go.
The story about how this article was written is very simple. It was late at night, and I was washing dishes, listening to Mark Levin's show from earlier in the day, and I thought, wow, that's amazing. I had seen all these articles, but nobody had actually put the case together the way Levin had, and so I reported the way he put it together, and I added some of the historical events that happened in between to basically show that the government under the Obama administration had done some surveillance of individuals close to Trump or a computer server in Trump Tower, and that somehow the result
none of that had been confirmed, though. You hadn't confirmed any of this stuff. There had been speculation.
Right.
But none of it, because we'd been trying to confirm some of this, and we never had.
Stop. Speculation by whom? All I did is go through the media reports. He's condemning his own colleagues. I rubbed their noses in this stuff, ladies and gentlemen. We've brought this to a head, or it'd still be going on. The insinuations, the innuendos, the suggestions, the calls for special prosecutors and impeachment. If I hadn't done what I did 2 Thursdays ago, it would still be going on. I know they want to focus on Trump's tweet. It's not the point. Now listen to Chuck Todd. Chuck Todd would never have said that 2 weeks ago. It's all insinuation. We tried to prove it. We couldn't prove it. Well, my friend, then your argument's with your fellow colleagues in the media. Go ahead.
Times, the Washington Post, the BBC, the Guardian.
There was allusions to it, but nobody had confirmed that.
The Times had former and current government officials talking about some of the conversations that had been listened into. So, you know, if what you're saying is true, that it was speculative, it was certainly being treated as established reality because all of these speculative pieces were being used to build a case about Russian hacking and Russian influence. And all of a sudden when, you know, like a Jenga tower, you sort of tugged at the bottom of it, that case fell apart. And now it becomes a question about, well, how did the government get this information and how did the press find out about it? And suddenly people were not interested in talking about Russian hacking anymore.
He got it right. It's exactly right. Now, we tried to confirm this stuff. We couldn't confirm it. Do you have proof? Chuck, you're missing the whole point. Do you have to be a dummy to be a journalist? They're missing the entire point. The point is, I strung together their stories. I didn't put chunks together to create a conspiracy. I said, if this reporting is accurate, these are police state tactics, and there's a silent coup going on. A phrase I've used over the years. Accurately, I might add. That's what I said. And then they have pivoted. They have genuflected. Well, we tried to confirm this. But why did you try to confirm it now? Why didn't you try to confirm it 2 months ago? Or on Inauguration Day? Why didn't you try to confirm it all back then? And yet, ladies and gentlemen, there's still essential facts out there that haven't been contradicted. The NSA rule, watered down. The spreading of information by White House officials, and so forth. And the media still don't talk about it. Why is that? You know, I want to spend a minute on why Hillsdale College is relevant to your life, even if you don't have a family member in college. Hillsdale helps all of us know how critical liberty is in every aspect of our lives. They can help you really understand that a nation and her people thrive when there's economic freedom, and how our government is uniquely formed with the express purpose of protecting the dignity and worth of every human being. For instance, there are very few institutions that dedicate their entire existence to helping us think through these things. The schools don't. The schools don't. The mass media certainly doesn't, but Hillsdale College does. And my dear friend, Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, one of the nation's great experts on the Declaration, and I might add, Churchill, knows you hunger for truth, and that our republic and way of life depends on American citizens, starting with you becoming advocates for basic truths. No matter your age, it's never too late to learn. You can learn through their free online courses, free subscription to Imprimis, and local free Hillsdale events. Here's what you do. Go to levinforhillsdale.com. That's Levin for Hillsdale.com to see how Hillsdale can help you pursue truth and defend liberty. That's levinforhillsdale.com. Levin, levinforhillsdale.com. In the end, I would think the media would thank me, Mr. Producer, for helping them sort this all out, for reminding them what their job is supposed to be. I would think in the end, Chuck Todd would do an entire show thanking me for my show 2 Thursdays ago. Otherwise, his humiliation would be continuing to this day. Now we have the media, ladies and gentlemen. They can't do enough stories on. You can't prove that Trump had ties to the Russians. You can't prove that the government was investigating Trump or his people or entities. You can't prove. It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. For the last months, they created this myth. And that's what it is, a myth. Ladies and gentlemen, we salute our armed forces, police officers, firefighters, and emergency personnel. Thank you for listening. Check out Levin TV tonight. It's a great one, and I'll see you tomorrow on the radio. God bless you.